Hello and welcome to Identirati Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue. And today the topic is post-deepfake, can we stop identity fraud? And I have as a guest Ofer Friedman from Authentics. Welcome, Ofer.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
And David Mahdi from Transmit Security. Welcome, David.
Hello. Hi, Mike. Hi, Ofer. And hello to our audience. Thanks for joining us
Hi.
today.
So I'm going to start this conversation off by actually showing a post from from Alex Banks, and let me maximize it. And maybe is this the type of deep fake that we're talking about that keeps you up at night, Ofer?
No, actually, I sleep well, but no, this this is more for fun and games and that sort of thing, or for um, types of businesses we are not involved in. We are in the identity verification business for the purpose of preventing fraud. And the usual process is not a nice Japanese girl eating whatever, but it's people presenting their IDs, taking selfies, and basically identifying themselves according to regulations in order to open accounts and perform some certain actions with those accounts. So it is not just any clip. It is a session. There needs to be an ID document in it. There needs to be a selfie in it. And in order to try to bypass defenses, it has to be really good.
Okay, and so maybe what are the current attacks that could use this type of technology?
Okay, let me try to divide it this way. Um, the market in general, by the way, we work globally, okay? Some of the biggest players in the world. So we see everything coming from everywhere. I would put it in two types of fronts. One of them is the stills front. All of those countries that still allow people to basically upload images of a selfie and an image of an ID. So people do have a time to prepare the best photos they can get their hands on. Usually, if they are a bit professional, they would put on them real, genuine people's PII, personally identifiable information, all the details, etc., and prepare a good photo. Now there are enough generators of. Just a second.
No
Small
worries.
apparatus.
This is
Yeah.
Identirati Office Hours, not Channel 4, so no worries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There are enough websites that will do it for either for free or for something. You can produce very, very convincing face photos. Those generators. Some of them already were made public, and there are already websites that will issue for you, so to speak, an image of an ID placed on whatever you want, a sofa, a chair, a desk, or whatever, with the details you want on any country you want, and these will be submitted. Okay, so the stills based is very popular because it's very easy to do. You're just preparing the best one you can get, put it, upload it, and you are supposed to be in. But fraud is already more sophisticated, let's say in more advanced markets. Because in markets like the US, Europe, and some other markets, you are supposed to be having a live session.
Mhm.
So there is an app, usually an app, but it can also be done via computer, where you're getting instructions. Hold your ID against the camera, or take the ID from a picture of the ID from your palm. Then take the selfie, and you're being guided, and you etc. It's a live session. It's not stills. It's now a video situation. There, the professionals in the fraudster world already are working, and we see that every day. But for the amateurs, just to open one account somewhere because they can't or whatever, that would be too expensive, complicated, and will require some kind of knowledge. which is why we actually have two types of tools. One of them is meant to detect those cases that are not that professionals, but compose the high volume. And the second one is basically meant to organize crime. It
Yeah.
means that these tools could create, I actually have examples. I cannot show you because there might be some actual PII on them. They will produce the most convincing images. By the way, I even tested on people in a conference, putting a real person's image and a fake person's image, like deepfaked one,
Uh-huh.
and asked the audience which one is the fake. They were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fake can be, or deepfake can be more convincing than conventional images.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is absolutely where we're going to. I think a couple things just in response to that offer. One, I was a Gartner analyst. I was at Gartner for almost 7 years, and I was a Gartner analyst through COVID. And before COVID, there were a lot of, what we call IDV or identity verification vendors out there making technology. And it was an interesting space because obviously as more digital services come online, organizations want to create these digital identities, and they use identity verification with like you just said in the stills, right? Snapping a selfie and uploading a driver's license or passport or whatever it might be to fit that particular use case. And so that market was kind of moving along. And then obviously when COVID happened, very painful for all of us, I'm sure, organizations were just forced to do remote verification. And as an analyst, I was on the front end of that because we were just getting thousands of inquiries from organizations, large, small, governments, you name it, all around the world saying, what do we do here, right? The first wave, if I just pause really quickly, was actually enterprises concerned about secure access, right? Ramping up secure access and all that. But then there was a very quick rush into IDV. And so what's interesting is when I look at all of the vendors that are out there today and how they really amassed their revenues, because many of them are over $100 million US. It was all during COVID when people were panicking. And why am I bringing that up? Is because I think humans, as we've demonstrated over thousands of years, we don't do anything unless we experience pain or there's a problem or there's a reason to do it. And so I think a good chunk of the market globally invested in a lot of these IDV solutions without actually understanding where this was going to go. We already knew about deepfakes from like 2017. There's the Obama stuff. There's all of that. So if you were to read the tea leaves, you were to know that at some point this was going to get good enough that it's going to trick a lot of these solutions that are already in market today. And so I just, my view, Ofer, when you're mentioning that, is I just think about all of the organizations I talked to, and they just reacted, deployed what they thought was the right thing at that moment in time. And I get it, right? They had to do what they had to do. But I think as we go into this new world, you're right. We have to think about the common basic types of fraud or threats or the things that they'll do to trick with stills and what have you. But we have to brace for this Gen AI fueled future. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll stop, but last week, was it last week or the week before? Week before, my brain's all like moving together. With RSA, I did 2 panels, and it was AI versus AI. And when we polled the audience, it was an RSA e-fraud event. So it was a lot of financial institutions across North America, around the world. When we did a live poll, it was like ATO, account takeover attacks, were up, compliance was up. But then all of a sudden, Gen AI, it was like, it went all the way to the top and it just stayed there. So everyone, at least in that audience, which are fraud people, they were just like acutely aware of what is going to be coming with Gen AI. And they already know, they're already past the point of like, we have to solve those. But my concern is that we still have these legacy solutions that are out there. And I do think that as we start to move forward to these new threats and what attackers can do, we have to start bracing for that. So it's good that you highlighted both those pieces, because I agree with that. I'll stop there.
Okay. By the way, we already see it's part of our job, my job, to actually see where the market is going. And I don't know how much people are aware, but we are in a watershed situation in the market about identity verification, and about how far can crime be sophisticated. I'm sure people know that there are already IDs or credentials on phones, like EIDs. You already have it in various states in the US. You already have it on Apple. Europe is launching their wallet, which will be on blockchain. Basically, any country I can think about is either doing it, in the process of doing it, or will be doing it already in the coming years, and it will change the way how you verify your identity. At the same token, there are additional markets being created as we speak, and only those in those markets are aware to what extent. For instance, something that sounds very small, perhaps minor, which is age verification. Okay, age verification is one of the responses to a phenomena or development that is bound to happen, which is some control over what's in the media. And deepfake is the media of the future. Okay, your anchors, you will never know whom you're talking about. So we started out talking about, okay, I want to open an account. Here's my ID. Here's my selfie. Now you would probably need to know that you're talking to me. It's really me. Okay. And you'll have no idea because it will look genuine. I can tell you that right now, people are using systems called OBS. That's basically a broadcasting software that's used for things like this, integrating it with deepfake technologies. And I already have some captured sessions where I can actually be not me, but listening to you, responding to you with whatever voice I want, even now holding my ID in front of the camera, and it will be this face on the ID. Okay, now I know you're not sure you're looking at Ofer, right?
I was wondering that.
Mike and I aren't actually here. You're talking to deepfakes right now.
I was planning to make that joke.
And if you take it further, you understand that once you got into generative, okay, you're going into mass production. If software can do one version of Ofer, it can do 1,000.
Yeah.
It can open 1,000 accounts in different countries, in different places, all speaking that language with the right data on it, etc. So I actually believe, because I'm kind of at the forefront, but it's my job to know where it's all going. We are highly likely to have a good chance to be talking to robots, not the ones with the clunky ones with Terminator type, but more like Matrix type, because we are remote. You have no idea. So identity verification will have to be looking for exactly the proof that I'm actually me talking to you now with my voice and responding to you. And I'll also have to believe that David is David and not, I don't know.
So one of our
it's a
previous
revolution
guests,
coming.
one of our previous guests suggested that he wanted to build a system where his AI could go out and date for him. So my AI would meet your AI and date, and then tell me if actually like there's a potential match here do my screening for my second date. So actually, what you're saying doesn't sound that far-fetched to me. Actually,
yeah.
Well, eventually, someone will have to show up at the church, I assume. But until then,
exactly.
Be who you can be.
I mean, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so as David said, though, where's the business value? I mean, obviously, the early adopters for corporate access, but where are you seeing the early adopters today? And because ultimately, this type of security might not make sense if I'm playing chess. So where is the business value that's sufficient today, and where do you see that trend going in the future?
Well, I can tell you that we're catching deepfake or generative AI involved attacks now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in the future. It's happening now. And yes, the number is increasing. And by the way, it's increasing not just because the technology is there, but it's easier and more convincing. So you don't have to be that pro in order to produce that type of thing. So we are seeing it already. Point is that there is now, as the title was, an arms race. In that arms race, it's actually the fraudsters who always do the next trick that you have to find out exists, build something against it, etc. So the paradigm of how actually deepfake is detected will have to change. We are kind of, if you think about it, like the antivirus or virus detection, computer virus detection, at the onset, that was supposed to learn the patterns of a certain virus. Along the time, there are so many variations that there is no way of even knowing all of them, learning them all in advance in order to get to that point. So the methodology changed. The same exactly is going to happen to deepfake detection, because now deepfake detection behaves in many cases like the first antivirus. It needs to know that, I know, you see like some kind of blur or whatever. If I move too fast, it will disappear. So you cannot count on that anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe David, can I put you on the spot maybe to give an answer to that?
Go for it.
Well, so maybe, from your perch at Transmit Security, one of the biggest security companies in the world, where do you think the focus of like attention in terms of mitigating this risk is?
That's a great question, and just to kind of connect that to what Ofer was saying as well. So number one, yeah, absolutely. Deepfakes are here, and again, just echoing what I saw with a lot of the fraud leaders at a lot of financial institutions a couple of weeks ago at RSA. We're detecting them now, right? We're seeing them there. We're kind of meeting the attackers where we can, but it's asymmetric. In fact, actually, I'm giving a talk next week at Identiverse on this exactly, and Transmit's coming out with a dark web report that should be published soon, where we've looked at what's going on in the dark web. And this is the way how I'm thinking of it. And very quickly, just by background, like I got into identity after. I did some hacking a long time ago. I had a BBS, and for me, it was a means to an end because I was a pirate. I wanted my 0 to 3D wares. And so I was challenged as a kid to, like a teenager, to just learn all this stuff. I didn't have any red tape. I didn't have anything. I was fortunate to have a father that worked at a company that brought home amazing hardware. So I was very fortunate to have access to all that. But the lesson that I learned as a teenager, and I've brought into the identity world, is attackers don't care what your title is. They don't care if you consider yourself a network engineer, an identity specialist. It doesn't matter to them. They will find a way in. Good example is MGM. Right? They call the help desk, they do social, they do recon, they do all of that. Deepfakes are just another approach that they can leverage in their arsenal. So I totally agree with what Ofer's saying, as in terms of, we've got to up the ante in how we detect them. We've got to look at different ways to anticipate them, have more behavioral analysis of them, so we understand, what those look like. But if we are going to put all of our, so we say, eggs in the basket of, selfie checking and all this, we'll fail. We'll always fail. I've always said this is not like Lord of the Rings, where there's one ring to rule them all, or one authentication method to rule them all, or one thing. You have to actually look at that whole user journey. And the idea is you have to understand your customer as best as you can, or understand your employee or that identity as best as you can, understand their behaviors, understand all of these things. Yes, do I think these identity networks and decentralized identity is going to help? Yeah, I do. But it's going to just change the playing field of what attackers do. And last thing I'll just say, because I think I'm maybe veering away from the question, Mike, but what I'm going to be talking about next week at Identiverse is, really what we're seeing as in terms of it's really a cocktail of methods that they're using. They're not necessarily using one method. If they want to go after you, they'll use things like fraud GPT to say, show me, tell me all the software stack that this particular airline is using. Oh, they're using Akamai. Oh, they're using this. They're using this captcha system. They're using this, using this. Okay, great. I have all this. Tell me who is on the IT team, right? And it'll tell them. And then they can go, all right, I'm going to go on to a social network and I'm going to do some reconnaissance. So what we're actually seeing is the convergence of kind of cybersecurity, where there's vulnerabilities, CVEs and all this, and they're combining it with social fraud and scam techniques, and they're combining those together, and that's allowing them to get into these systems, whether they're going after customers, creating new fake accounts, or they're trying to get into like MGM to do ransomware. I'll stop there because there's a lot more, but I'll pause there.
Maybe if I could interject one thing for a second. There was a movie called Compliance. I just checked Wikipedia. It's from 2012. It's about an actual phone scam that took place where a guy he called a fast food restaurant, and he scammed them into doing some pretty incredible things just over the phone without video. And so the idea that I could have a real-time person that I'm controlling, maybe in a different voice, if that's a trusted person, the type of havoc that could wreak on an organization. That we have the side channel attack. That's the lead bar or the lead pipe. That's give me your password or I hit you with the lead pipe. The side channel attack.
Yep.
So yeah, you're right. These attacks don't have to be. They're not necessarily what we've thought of, and it does seem like this type of tool could be used to some terrifying effect in the wrong hands.
There's a kind of a framework that I came up with almost 1.5 years ago now, and we call and I'm going to talk about it again next week, but I've talked about it so many times. It's called the 3 Vs. Right. So any practitioners listening to this right now, or even if you're a vendor making technology, the first thing you need to do is start thinking of these 3 Vs. What are those 3 Vs? So this technology, right? Gen AI, fraud GPT, evil GPT, which you can pay subscriptions to, so you can get access to all these things. It gives you things like reconnaissance information, obviously code snippets, vulnerability information, and there's lots of other things in there. And you can even say like, help me create a deepfake, and it'll just give you a recipe to say, hey, go download this tool, go and do all these things, right? So now you can have people very quickly sanity check what they're doing, and to steal Microsoft's tagline, right? It can be their co-pilot. But the 3 Vs are, so with all of this, what that's going to do is there's going to be more volume, so higher volume of attacks. There's going to be a higher velocity. So again, attackers, this is asymmetric, right? And my point in saying I could try anything I wanted and failed. I didn't have to present it to a team internally. I didn't have a board. I would try something and I would fail and I would try it again. And that's what fraudsters, attackers do. So velocity is going to be higher, and variety. So volume, velocity, and variety. More attacks going to happen at a faster pace. And the variety, because they can change patterns. They can say, oh, it looks like we were going to use this CVE, this critical vulnerability, to attack this airline, but it looks like we just checked, and it looks like they patched that. So we can't use that. But these phishing emails, these other payloads we're going to deploy, and these deepfakes that we've already created for these targeted users, we're going to use all those. But we just need to switch out the CVE and maybe go for something else that's already in their stack, which again, I can find out very quickly by using these tools to effectively short circuit that part of the kill chain of doing reconnaissance. So that's kind of what I'm more concerned about, is the cocktail of approaches versus, we have to get what Ofer is saying. We've got to get that right, and we have to make sure we're doing that. But my fear is that if we don't have fraud people, cybersecurity people, and identity people thinking more broadly, we're going to fail. And fraudsters, I can 100% tell you, they'll win.
So Ofer, it seems like from what David's describing, there's this sort of multi-faceted attack surface area. How do we build a multi-layered defense to to mitigate some of those attacks. Any thoughts?
Yeah, we already do that. Let's say the traditional way of knowing who you are, verifying who you are, was based on what you give me. Okay, pictures or videos of yourself and your ID. Relying on that becomes more and more problematic, which is why a second layer of defense has been added. I think David touched it in a kind of way, which is more behavioral.
Mhm.
Okay, because as David said, if we are in the age of generative, you don't do it once. You can do it lots of times, and you're using tools. Tools use certain algorithms, so there is some system into it, and you can start randomizing. David talked about the variety, I think was the name. We see exactly these, like certain ID in the same room, but that room is organized in 1,000 different ways. So what is happening is that the images are becoming good enough or problematic enough to detect, but then the behavior, the engine behind them, is the one that becomes more detectable. I'm actually think that identity verification and cyber are slowly meeting in
Yeah.
terms of working in very similar ways.
Actually, let me just jump on that really quick, because again, sorry, the Gartner analyst thing was burnt in my brain, for better or worse. So yeah, just to back that up with evidence, I mean, certainly we see, kind of Ping Identity bought Showcard many years ago, and they took some of their IDV technology, and then they bought Secure Touch, or is it Secure or Secure Touch? I don't know. So they had some fraud, and then we have Entrust, who just bought on Fido, right? And then Transmit Security has its own native offerings for fraud, identity verification, and SIAM as well. So we are seeing those trends of these things coming together, which I'll be honest, I saw Gartner is releasing a Magic Quadrant for identity verification. And from what I can tell, like the scope of it is IDV can be quite large, and it's kind of narrowed into like cyber or online stuff. So I'll offer a lot of the stuff we're talking about here today. But I look at that and go, was that even going to exist as a standalone thing, or are people going to look for stacks? Like, it's interesting in where this is going to go. It's still too early to tell, but clearly there's fusion and convergence happening. There's no question there. And the reason why, and I would love arguments with this, I'll know I'll win anyways. And the reason why I'll win is because even if I ignore markets and I ignore buyers and I ignore investors and I ignore surveys, I don't care about surveys. Who cares about surveys? If I go into the dark web and I talk to people that I grew up with who maybe are still kind of doing some funny things in there, I just look at what they're doing, right? And it doesn't really matter about everything else. It matters about that. And it doesn't matter in a way with compliance, like we have to do compliance, but the reality is that who cares? Remember what I said earlier, attackers don't care if you're PCI compliant or your GDPR, or they don't care. They're going to find a way in. So we have to pay attention to what they are doing. And I think, Ofer, they're forcing exactly what you were saying. They're forcing this to actually happen, this fusion of cyber fraud and even identity as well.
David, before everyone is becoming depressed,
Sorry.
there is a light at the end of the tunnel, yet the light is flickering. Okay, we talked about the digital IDs, okay, the ones on your phone.
Yeah.
So they're encrypted, okay, asynchronously. So they're quite protected. So assuming you have that on your mobile, it will take, I think, with today's computing, at least according to one source I read, 5,000 years to break the encryption. Yet,
Brute force, yeah.
in 10 years or less, you have quantum computing mature. Now, 10 years does not mean that your computer here at home is going to be quantum. I think it'll be a bit expensive and perhaps even big.
Mm-hmm.
But remember that those players who are usually not seen on the market have the money and the know-how to actually get it and use it. And that's professional organized crime fraud, and obviously states for whatever reasons. Now,
I'll jump in. I'm gonna make people depressed again. I'm sorry. My Canadian's coming out. I apologize too much.
Go for it.
Okay. I agree with you, but that just changes the entry point for the attacker. And there's one thing that I can tell you that pretty much almost anywhere in the world is a critical vulnerability with all these identity systems, including when we go to wallets and all the beautiful stuff that all these governments are doing. By the way, I worked on the Canadian identity system, which leverages a blockchain because Canadians can log in to pay their taxes using bank IDs and all this stuff. So Canada's pretty advanced in this world. When I worked at Entrust a long time ago, I worked on their PKI offering, and in particular, the one that was applied to e-passports. So I had the privilege to travel around the world and work with countries on a lot of different passports systems, so like Canada, US, UK, and many other countries, and national IDs as well, Spanish ID, the Emirati ID. So that actually was a really interesting experience to see all that. I used to go to this conference, and it was called ICAO. It's International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, and it's like a part of the UN. They are the ones that, I think I actually have my passport here.
Yeah, the ones setting the standards for international IDs.
You got it. The size of the passports, in particular, though, then all the symbols, so that like when you see that, if I have I do have it here, like this symbol here. So that's all standards based. So when an agent sees that symbol, they know that this is an e-passport. I won't get into the details of the different kinds, and I'm not going to show you my back page, but the back page, which has the machine readable zone, that's all that funny stuff at the bottom, your picture and all that information. ICAO sets that standard. Anyway, that's besides the point. But they have these meetings around the world, and they talk about all that stuff and where it needs to go, and they evangelize the benefits of e-passports. And they came out with e-passports to circumvent or have a countermeasure against passport fraud, right? So when passports were just paper and those pictures that you glued in, obviously if you're really good at counterfeits, you could counterfeit passports, and we have like spy agencies that even do that, right? Governments that do that, and of course bad people that do that as well. So the e-passport takes that back page and it digitalizes it and puts it on the chip that's in the passport. And then there's an antenna that's basically in the page that feels hard. And when it's closed, you technically can't read it. When the border agent swipes your machine readable zone, that's the key to unlock the digital information. And then they can validate it using a certificate validation. Great. So why am I telling you all this? So that's using PKI, it's using encryption, fairly strong standard encryption procedures. There's also other passports out there that actually have mutual authentication. So the reader has to authenticate to the passport first, otherwise it won't reveal information. And then biometric information needs to be provided as well, because it's, they have German passports and others that use a second standard called EAC. An incident happened where these spies assassinated somebody, and they used passports. They used a German passport, an Irish passport, I think a French passport, maybe a British passport. It was something like that. There was a bunch of them. And they went into this country and they assassinated somebody, and they said, hold on. They were using fake passports, but the passports were not fake. They were using all this cryptography. What did they do? They got
I can actually tell you, David.
They got their birth certificates. So they just went, I'm almost done. They didn't break the credential, which is why an attacker won't break the crypto on the phone. They don't need to. It could be quantum 20 years from now. It doesn't matter. They will go. I could go to a city hall and get a birth certificate and put my face and my fingerprints and associate it with Mike. And now I can become Mike and get as many credentials legitimately made as I want. And now I can start to do that. Now that's obviously extremely deep fake. But if you're motivated, you can absolutely do that. I'm sorry, I went on a long
That's
spiel.
actually
but-
been that's so.
I need to shoot back,
Good.
Mike. I need to shoot back. It so happened that Authentics actually started out as the company that introduced automation to airport security and border control.
Okay.
So kind of familiar with that one. B, there is a group in Germany called CCC, Chaos Computer Club. These are students, or I think that by now they are ex-students who specialize in basically cloning and reading those even remotely. And I think they break the record each version of a passport. What I meant to say before you jumped in was that there is here a point of vulnerability. In order to issue now your perfect, highly secure ID, you need first of all to be identified. And your means of being identified are what you have now, right? That's exactly where you can expect, let's say, professional bad players to be mass whitewashing identities, making them EIDs, which means next time you don't even have to do much in order to be proving you are you, and they are good. So obviously there is the duplication or the cloning thing. And by the way, I've seen worse stuff than just cloning, because once I can remotely read your ID or passport, I can do a lot of things. I mean, if you think about terrorism, I've seen examples of it.
Yeah.
So yes, there is the issue of the key. The key will eventually be broken, but it also will be probably extended. It won't be, how much is it, 21 bit? I don't recall. It will be more elaborate. But what I'm saying is that there is now a kind of gray area, gray time area, where people are going to issue those EIDs, which mostly organizations will count on because they are so secure.
Yeah.
And they will be doing it via the good old fakes we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So actually, I wanted to say that, what David pointed out about the birth certificates and the starting from a bad foundational identity, that's actually been the source of identity fraud for many, many years, for decades, really. And actually, in a week from today, we'll have another episode about government identity, and a big issue on the table is the foundational identity. How do you issue that initial identity that all those other things are hanging off of? And if that initial thing is wrong, you've broken your chain of custody. And that's a discussion that actually, I don't think we'll be able to address it in 45 minutes, but it's a really interesting point. But if I could bring us back maybe in our last go around on questions to the topic of continuous authentication, because a lot of the mitigations we've talked about here are happening at authentication time, but perhaps how do we utilize and a more continuous approach to mitigate this deep fraud challenge? Ofer, can I throw that one in? Maybe you, and then David can, if you have any thoughts.
First of all, we are moving very fast to continuous or immersive identification. Mind you that once your ID is on your phone, everything you do is connected to your ID. And all your behavior, which right now you gave away to Google or whoever, which was based basically then on only usage of that, is going to be mixed with your identity credentials, etc. So you are going to be identified basically. I mean, Big Brother is here. Okay, add to it what comes possibly next, which is the IOTs, which means all those devices that by definition belong to you, so they're connected to you. So if I now, I know I have an IOT in my mouse, it means, and it's moving, it means I'm here, right? So my mouse now says it's me. I already heard the say, by the way, about underwear. So you are going into a situation whereby privacy is dead. By the way, just the same token as facts about you are dead because they are already stolen.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally
Um,
agree. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. There was an interesting discussion that I think maybe folks in the identity world would know this person, Ian Glazer. I think Ian, I think I just was joining Gartner, or I think I was there, then Ian left. I'm like, great, you know. But anyway, he moved on to some bigger and better things, and you know, but we stayed in touch, and we you know had
He
some
moved on to Identity Office Hours, episode 9.
Amazon died.
So
Yeah, so
he has achieved great things.
he has, yeah. So shout out to Ian Glazer. Always been a fan of him. You know, I remember, you know, I remember he mentioned to me, he's like, why do we even log out and log in? Does it even make any sense to log, like the act of logging in and logging out, like just it maybe made sense like 20 years ago, but it doesn't really make sense in this constantly connected world. And so I was like, okay, go on, Ian. And he's like, okay, so if we have a situation, and you could have it in multiple industries, you know, I think we were talking about agriculture as a use case, right? People kind of going out in the field, coming back, using operational technology, which could be, you know, a Windows system or Linux system, doesn't really matter what it is. And he's like, why would you even log them out? Right. So the whole notion of continuous authentication is sure, you need some kind of onboarding. Identity verification converts you from a stranger to someone who's known. And then once you're known, the goal of identity, okay, really should be more bolted at the hip with experience. And what do I mean by that? If we were to meet in person, am I going to ask you for your ID? Am I going to authenticate you? No.
I was actually laughing because I was thinking about my dog Floki, and Floki knows it's me 100% of the time. He never needs to authenticate me. Even in the dark, he knows it's me coming down the hall.
Exactly. Well, think about all of the sensors he has. I mean, dogs have, what do they say? It's an insane number, like 30,000
It's pretty
times.
advanced technology in there. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So they're constantly doing their deepfake analysis, smelling, pulling it all in, and then in their brain, they're processing it very, very rapidly. And they're able, you know, your dog is able to know it's you.
And
And
somehow
guess
we
what?
think our phone is smarter.
Unless remote.
Well, but yeah, we'll get to that in a second. But the point is on continuous auth, right? I'm making the point that I think that again, I think it was a McKinsey conference a couple months ago. I actually said our experiment with the CISO has failed. How do we know it's failed? Every CISO I talk to like is stressed out and they want to leave. Right. And the board and CEOs and investors, they don't get it either. They don't get it. They
It's like
don't
the
get
batting coach in baseball.
Yeah. And it's like you keep putting on more compliance and then you want to hold these people like criminally liable. I'm like, I'm sorry. That's like asking you to get in the ring with Mike Tyson and say, yeah, don't get punched. You have to stay in the ring 12 rounds with Mike Tyson and you're not allowed to get punched. If you get punched, you're going to jail. Like that's impossible. That is impossible, let alone in the world of cyber.
Wait a second, David. Aren't you a CIO?
Well, you know what I mean. You know what I mean? I could go on and on and on. But on continuous auth, though, here's the thing. I think I'm you know, yes, we all need to do it. We need to leverage, you know, strong things like passkeys and all the different types of modalities that benefit your users by looking at their use cases and looking at what they have access to. But coupling that with understanding who they are, because ultimately this is an experience thing. And that was kind of what Ian and I were discussing in not logging people out. It's just kind of nonsensical in this day and age where it's like, I want my bank to know me so well that I never have to authenticate to them, that they know it's David and they know me so well that they'll, you know, Ofer, you said like privacy is dead. Yes, it is. And clearly the market has made a trade-off and saying, I'm going to use Gmail and I'm going to use all these services, but I want something in return if I'm going to give part of me away. You know, I think millennials and others, I think they're more open to that, but as long as the privacy and everything is respected. So my bank, I want them to know me so well that they can just let me in. It's like Cheers. I want to go where someone knows my name, log me in. If I go to make a money transfer, don't hold it up. I appreciate you doing fraud stuff, but don't hold it up. So that's where we need to go. And I actually think the CISO experiment, it needs to transition. And what I said to all these fraud leaders was that I think customer experience should own fraud, and I think customer experience should own identity. Full stop.
Well, we're actually coming up on the end. So can I give you any last thoughts before we have to call it?
Well, I wonder who our audience is, but if they are practitioners, I do recommend rethinking of where it's going. In terms of, I mean, the vast majority, over 90% of whatever companies and organizations still have traditional standard solutions that stop little fraud, and there is no way to detect it. Secondly, right now, fraud detection is usually the sentinel at the gate. Someone wants in, or to open an account, or to get in. You are checking that person. Once he's good, that's it. What about those that already got in? How do you get them out? So I'm asking the question because I have the answer, okay? We actually have a technology that does exactly that. But that's one thing I do recommend. Too many companies, by the way, pure out of knowledge, being exposed to those facts, etc., need to think about the layers of defense they have, looking from the gate out, from the gate in-house. And by the way, do not take deepfake detection as offered to you right now as that simple. It is working only partially. We actually checked most of the engines out there. So you have to test it professionally. Don't ever buy sales pitches on that one. So multi-layer defense, base it on what people are showing you or sending you, but also on behavior. And as I said, guard your back as well as you're guarding your front.
Trust but verify. Good advice. Well, I'm afraid we have to call it there. Thank you, David, for helping me co-host.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, Ofer, for I know it's late there. You're GMT plus two or so at least. So thank you, Ofer.
You don't want to know, but thank you very much. It was actually fun.
Okay, and next week next Thursday actually, we have a special episode with Prabhat, the former CTO of WSO2, who's going to critique Agama, which is Glue's new low-code identity webflow tool, and he's going to basically give me shit about it, and we're willing to hear whatever he has to say. So join in for that. And until next time, thanks everyone.